So then I would get you to begin with looking at these linear aspects of perspective going up and down, is to do some sketches like we did last week, but look for subject matter with roads or paths that are going up and down to deal with them, or maybe with creeks or rivers that are turning left and right, and be observant of how the perspective on that changes and how that vanishing point moves left and right and up and down. The other type of perspective that we're going to look at is aerial perspective. This is a way of using colour and colour temperature to create a deeper sense of depth, and is truer in depicting the atmospheric conditions of the moment. It was first observed and formalised by Da Vinci, but recognised by earlier scholars like Aristotle. There are key elements that create the sense of aerial perspective. Things get smaller as they go into the distance. Their temperature becomes cooler in terms of the colours. They become greyer and bluer as objects disappear into the distance. And also the contrast diminishes and the edges become softer. So for the exercise for doing aerial perspective, I want you to draw up a chart like this. These are just 1 inch intervals, slightly wider than an inch. And there's 12 intervals. Now you don't have to use all of them for this exercise, but I've given myself plenty to start with. What we want to do is, and you can be using any medium for this exercise. I'm going to do this one in oils. Just for ease. But you could be doing this in acrylic or watercolour, gouache, whatever. What we're going to do is I'm going to mix up a green that I would call an Australian green. It's primarily a mix of Prussian blue and burnt sienna. And opened up, and you can open it up with all different sort of yellows to create different toned versions of it. Mixing Prussian blue and burnt sienna together, you produce a very, very dark green that's quite suitable for doing your darks, for instance. So we're adding, there will be a lot more burnt sienna to the mix than Prussian. So you can see it looks quite dark when you mix the two of them together. But we'll just add a teeny tiny bit of green, white I should say, and that should start to reveal some of the greenness. I'll just paint that down, and into that I'm going to add. So it gives you sort of a really nice, once we open it up with a bit of white, it's a really lovely grey green. Quite nice for eucalypts and things like that too. Could maybe just have a back more. Wash that brush. Just a speck more burnt sienna in it. Now what we want to do is open this green. Oh, I might have added too much burnt sienna. Yep, too much burnt sienna. It's lost its green. It's gone to absolute grey. You can see the difference, and that wasn't much burnt sienna that I added in. And it's gone very, very grey. So it's probably just tilting slightly to the Prussian blue. Yeah, I've probably gone a little bit too far. We shall get it. Oh well, whatever I do now, I'm going to stick with. I'm just going to go in there with that. That'll do. We want to open this colour now up to a tone 5. We can do that by just opening it up with white, but it's going to be very greyed off. We want it maybe to have that warmth, that greeniness that we would expect from a colour in the foreground, basically. Because, I mean, that's one of the principles of aerial perspective. Warmer colours to the fore. So, I mean, mixing with Prussian and burnt sienna, we've got a very cold blue and a warm red here, or yellow. And that, you know, they don't necessarily make the most warmest of colours. So we can add into that something like Cad Yellow Medium, and that will also start to help lighten it up to tone 5. So by adding a little bit of that in, we've started to boost that colour in the direction of tone 5. Probably then adjust it. We want it not to go too green. That's looking better. Go back in with a bit of Cad Yellow. That's better. So what we want to do is I want you to mix this colour to tone 5. So the best way of doing that, of seeing if you're heading in the right direction, is paint a little bit down onto a piece of paper and hold it next to a tonal chart of 1 to 9. There's number 5 is what I have mixed. Squint down. Yes, it's still very, very dark. We're probably still up at about tone 8 or 7, probably closer to 8. So we've got a long way to go in terms of getting that light. You could start to sneak into it just a little bit of white, but it will chalk it if you add too much. So we've opened that now up with some white. We'll paint that down and see where we've got tonally. So paint it right to the very edge of your piece of paper so that you're able then to compare right across. Right, by adding a bit of white, we've got it down to tone 6. It's still a little bit darker than tone 5. It's definitely lighter than 7, so we're down to 6. We might just try and kick it over that last step by going back in with a bit of yellow. Keeps the saturation up. And in with a bit of white again, and let's see what we've established there. That's looking pretty good. Straight away I can see on there, it's darker than 4. Squint down, it disappears into 5. It's lighter than 6. So I've established I've got my Australian green mixed to a tone 5. We're going to paint that down in this very first square. Like so. Beautiful. With this exercise, what I want you to do is, here's your starting point. And I want you to try, and with using your knowledge of changing the temperature and the saturation and the hue of a colour, I want you to transform this all the way through to a cool blue-violet. So I'm just going to put some alizarin crimson out as well. The trick of this exercise will be is that I want you to maintain the tone all the way through. So I'm going to mix a blue-violet from alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, but then I'm also going to put into it some Prussian, and that will cool it down. The alizarin crimson being a cool red and the Prussian blue being a cool blue. And pull this down to a cool blue violet. We put a little bit of alizarin, we put a bit of Prussian blue in there, we put a little bit of ultramarine blue in there, simply because it will then get that lovely blue-violet going on. This is a case where we can lighten this purely really just by adding white. And we're going to paint some of that down. I have not mixed that in thoroughly. We'll try that on again. And we want to do the same thing of put that against our grayscale. We're about tone 5. Probably just want to grey that out slightly. Blue violet, so we're going to hit it with a little bit of that. And a speck of that. That's a bit better. It's got just a bit, taken a bit of that oomph out of it. Beautiful colour. What you could do is just speak more white. And there, I'm quite happy. He's matched in tone. with our there we are. So we've got a tone 5 blue violet, a grade blue violet here. You could paint that down in, which I'll do it for the sake of ease. There is that. So, tone 5 to tone 5. So we have got a tone 5 Australian green, made from Prussian blue, burnt sienna, and cad yellow medium. And we have a tone 5 grade blue violet with ultramarine blue, Prussian blue, alizarin crimson, and it has a touch with white mainly, with a touch of burnt sienna and cad yellow medium in it. Just to take a bit of that brilliance out. They were added just to tone it back and give it a little bit of greyness. So the idea of this exercise is that you create the sequence that will get you from here to here. So we want to progressively grey, blue, this colour, and cool it as well, to get it over here to this mix here. To give you an idea of what I would think about doing is, and to keep it tone 5 all the way as well, is probably in that next stage where the first thing we want to do is we want to maybe grey it slightly, and we want a blue and give it a little bit of blueness. So it's where we might just touch it with a tiny bit of Prussian blue, of ultramarine blue, to keep the warmth in it, and probably touch it with a little bit of white just to keep the tone up. And that probably would be enough for our first step. Paint that down. And you can see already that is a significant change, just adding that little bit of ultramarine blue into it, that it has blued that green now. Beautiful. What I would also recommend doing is not just judging it off there and mixing it down, is keeping this handy. So we'll go maybe another step of ultramarine, and that's been a big step. And adding white back in that to get the lightness back up to tone 5. And I think I've just added too much. And paint that down onto a piece of paper like so. So that you're able to hold it against your chart and see if you are still within tone 5, and actually that's not too bad. I thought I'd added too much white. We'll paint that one down. So as I said at the beginning, don't worry if you don't use all 12, we'll just move that up a bit closer. But see how many jumps you can make to get that Australian green matching in tone the whole way through. So to go from that to that would be the first one to do. And you would just progress like that. We want this colour, and this is cooler, and this is warmer too. So we want this green to go from a warm colour or hot colour through to a cooler blue, so that we've got a temperature recession happening as well. In this box, a set of boxes down here, I want you to do a similar exercise. This time coming back to mixing our Australian green with Prussian, burnt sienna, opening it up with a little bit of yellow and a touch of white, just to bring that colour out a little bit. The yellow will bring that colour out. And we want to keep it up near tone 9. So this time we're going with a dark blue, or a dark, I should say, warm Australian green. So there it is, there. And this time we want to do the same sort of thing as what we did up here. But this time we're going to go from tone 9, and the one big transition that's going to happen across here is that it's also going to end up, we want to get to this blue cooler, blue violet in tone 5 that we did earlier. So again, we want to go to a cooler tone 5 grade blue violet. That did have white in it too. So here we've got a warm tone 9 Australian green made with Prussian blue, burnt sienna, cad yellow medium, and there is a touch of white in there. And so we want to progressively, just slowly, because we're only jumping from tone 9 to 5, so we don't go full on, but we just want to progressively open up and lighten this this colour, this Australian dark green. So we want to lighten it in tone, but we also want it then to go bluer and greyer and cooler as it progresses through to this. So to start us off is that we're going to lighten it with adding maybe a little bit more cad yellow medium into it. You can start to see that started to lighten it up. And we might just touch it with a little bit of white. That will actually help it grey slightly too. And we'll touch it with a bit of that ultramarine blue, just to start to make it go bluer, but without it going too cold too quickly. So remember, you'll cool it with both of these rows with cooler blues as you progress through. So you might end up having to get out some other colours other than what I've started with here. You might need cerulean, you might need cobalt. You might start to need to introduce more alizarin crimson into both of these colours as you progress through these series of... that's a good one there. So it's still slightly darker. It's about a tone 8.5. So it's sitting really quite nicely as still quite close to the first one, but just lightened up slightly. So I'm going to actually paint that in as our next step. Gorgeous. We'll go a couple more just to keep you seeing what I'm after. Again, I'll probably just open that up with, lighten it a little bit with the Cadulo Light. Cadulo Medium, I'm sorry. Go into it with a little bit of white. And we might just reintroduce a little bit of ultramarine blue into that. We might just start to add a little bit of alizarin crimson too, which is going to mean we're going to probably need to add a wee bit more white again. Paint a square of this down. Now we probably, we probably want to keep this still sitting up around tone 8. So we don't want to go too light. We've probably just jumped a wee bit. We're probably doing about... it's about 7 and a bit. So we've jumped up a little bit too quick. So what we can do to darken that is just hit it with a little bit of all of our colours back in again. Primarily the little bit of Prussian will kick it back up, and hit it with a little bit of burnt sienna again. That's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's better, I can see. So as always, good luck with these exercises. Enjoy playing with a bit of colour. Don't get too stressed about getting the perspective right. That comes with practice. And I look forward to seeing you soon.